Welcome everybody to the Recreate Your Health project. I am your host today, Miss Miranda Dano, and I'm super excited to introduce Dr. Saman Rezaie. He works with my other host, Dr. Lauren Beardsley, and they have created a business called Blocks of Health, which is amazing. Their approach, as I said about Lauren earlier, their approach to health and wellness is unlike anything I've ever seen, completely holistic. They empower people to, and by people I mean me personally, throughout my life, throughout most of my adult life anyway, to really take control of their own health and really get to like this next level of health and wellness. And I'm so blessed to know them. So excited to have you here. Saman, I could go on and on about all the things I love about you, but I'll make it brief for our listeners. One of your superpowers is seeing people's true potential and then like unabashedly just pushing them towards it. And I love that about you. It's one of my favorite things about you. And I have to mention that when I talk about you. You're also the epitome of what I would call the evolved man, which is a whole other conversation, and one of my dearest friends. So thank you so much for being with me today on the Recreate Your Health project.
Thank you for hosting me here today, Coach, as I should say, if that's fitting.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So, I told people a little bit about you, but why don't you tell us about your background and what drew you to health and wellness?
So everything kind of started for me. Like I've just always been such a interest in kind of like how the human body kind of works. So going into sciences and the biologies and all that stuff was always very interesting to me because I wanted to understand like the inner workings. And so as I went down that path, like I went to grad school, did molecular biology, and then it was really getting into like the nitty gritty. Like you're learning about like the molecular pathways. And at that point, like I was also understanding like diet and exercise and health in a different way. And then it kind of ended up coming back like full circle where it was really then understanding like the little nitty gritty. It's nice and all, but it doesn't help you like understand like the bigger picture, the bigger processes. What are the big things that we can do in life that then allow those little processes to function better? And so that's been my path and journey, I think, this whole time, going even to like naturopathic medical school, working in a clinic that you were obviously helping running, and then kind of coming to what we're doing now, which is considered more like lifestyle medicine or health coaching, but we call ourselves health engineers because we're just trying to get people to be themselves in the healthiest fashion that's possible.
I love it. So good. So good. So with that in mind, can you tell us what your 3 best practices are for staying healthy right now?
Just for myself?
Sure. Yeah. Just for you. Yeah. What are your 3? I'm sure that it's sort of, depending on where you're at, it could be sort of a moving target, right? Like at any different phase in your life, you're working on something else. But what are your favorite sort of 3 best practices right now?
So number one, and the biggest one for me is always going to be just being myself. And it's such a, like you mentioned as we started out, it's such a important for me to be me, because that's what allows just everything to be aligned, energy to flow. And then when I'm being myself, there's no like friction or rub or me not being my true self. So then when you're not being your real self, that leads to dis-ease, and then that leads to disease of the body. So, being true to myself is the most important thing I found for myself to keep myself healthy. And that doesn't always agree with everyone. And sometimes that's hard, and you're going against what maybe other people expect of you, of what like societal expectations, and, but it's the most important thing I think for me. So that's number one. 2 is just finding ways to just have fun with things and make them simple. So when things start getting too complicated, like I don't keep up with them. Like they're really interesting at first, but then I'm just kind of like, okay, like I'm done with that. Like that's over. So keeping it super easy. And then I think just understanding, what my purpose is and like where my beliefs are at, and making sure that those kind of line up, because if they don't, then like I just notice that I get stuck in loops or habits or behaviors that I'm kind of like, okay, this is obviously not working. I need to do something different. So, working at those 2 endpoints of like purpose and beliefs and making sure those are lined up just helps everything flow for me a lot better.
I think those are incredible answers and a great example of how you think about health. Like I could ask a million other doctors that same question and none of them would give me those answers, which is why I love you. I think that's wonderful. Especially when it comes to health and everything that we have going on right now with the coronavirus, what do you feel like your patients mostly need from you right now? Like what do you find yourself talking to people about and helping people with?
And honestly, for me, the conversation really hasn't changed too much, because for me, it's always kind of like, what are you going to do now? And whether COVID's going on or it's not going on, my question is always to people like, what are you going to do now? I think what you're inferring to is that because COVID's happening, it's so in our face that like people are just, it change is inevitable. Like you're being forced to kind of change, but at the same time, like how much are you also then willing to take advantage of the time, the opportunity, the situation to, you could talk about like leveling up your game, but for me, it's just like going back to center and being more of who you are. Like maybe you'd created a life that you were kind of felt like stuck with or trapped. And
Mm.
now it's like a time you have a chance to kind of like ultimately like what this project is, recreate that, and make it more of like what you want. And I think that's the thing that's so important. And that's what I'm always trying to do with people. Like people have goals and stuff, but I'm like, what do you want to do that for? Like, what's the why? What's the purpose? And then like, do you believe that? Because if you don't believe it, I mean, it's never going to happen.
Yeah, and this time is like not only giving you a chance to think back about, your why and your purpose and all of those things, but if you're not somebody who was in touch with that at this moment, man, that came into your face all of a sudden, right? So it is an opportunity in the most positive light, and that's certainly how I choose to see it. But also, that sort of not really was forced upon you, but it like all of a sudden came full force in your face, which I think is it can be a challenging thing for people, but I think can definitely be such a positive way to consider this sort of change in lifestyle that's happened for everybody.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that's when we are able to make the biggest changes, is when something kind of almost gets forced upon you, where it's, you have that choice of reacting or responding. And if you can just keep your cool and stay collected enough and respond, you can turn it into exactly what you're talking about, as a positive opportunity to then, make change that you're actually happy with instead of doing the reactions. And then I always say like, everything has waves, it reverberates. So like when you react, maybe whether it's right or wrong, you did what you did in that moment, but there's going to be waves of like, either shrapnel or, just cause and effect that you sometimes might have to clean up, where when you can respond, you can maybe build that thing in a way that the waves that you make end up amplifying that instead of kind of creating more chaos for you.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so we've spoken a little bit about how your approach to health is different, but can you give people a little bit of a sneak peek into how that goes? Like, could you help us understand something a little bit more specific to how you talk to people about health, like maybe with the driver and director and that relationship? Can we like, without opening up the whole thing, can we give people a little sneak peek? Is that possible?
Yeah. So
Okay.
usually with clients, like that never happens. Like I never really am kind of opening that box that you're talking about. Like I'm just kind of
Okay.
processing that information for myself.
Sure.
Because
Oh, okay.
again, like you said, if we start talking about it, like people will just be like, okay, has nothing to do with what I want. So the reason that
Okay.
Dr. Beards and myself built that system, because it helps us to talk about people in a way to then figure out what they're really missing, so that we can get them to move forward and create the health that they want. Now, as people start working with us a little bit more, we start using that lingo, they kind of get into it.
Okay.
And so really the driver and director, those are really two of our five assemblers. So we figure everybody is designed this way. You have your driver at the center, and then you have your generator, which represents your body. You have your indicator, which are your emotions. You have your processor, which is your mind or your brain. And then you have your director, which are your beliefs. And
Okay.
so where you actually get everything done in life is with your generator and your indicator. So if you can stay in these two levels, it's literally doing something, seeing what kind of reaction you have, and then that helps guide you. And so if you have your other things lined up, the driver and the director, which sit above and below, then you can stay in that place and continue to create in your life, and you're not going to have any problems. Now, where people get stuck is they start putting the processor in place. So most people live out of their minds. This is
Yeah.
driving, and this should never be driving the vehicle or the body or whatever it is. And
Sure.
so where they get in trouble is your driver's your purpose. And so you have to know what that is. If you don't know what your purpose is, you don't have like a driving force. Like that's what really like gets you to go. And
Mm.
so I think me and you can both relate to this. We're parents. So sometimes our driver is, trying to be the best person that we can for our kids. And so that becomes easy. Like we have this all day. Sometimes things come up and you're like, okay, I thought I was wearing this one hat or one purpose where I was trying to get stuff done, but like I got to click into parent mode and kind of be on and do and take care of this so that I can get back to doing whatever needs to happen.
Sure, sure. Got it. Okay. So, and what's amazing when working with you is how you sort of helped me and can help patients sort of stay on track. So I'll be all up in here. Like, what am I supposed to do? Do I eat the thing? How much sleep do I need? All these details. And you're like, okay, let's take a step back, Miranda, and talk about, the important pieces that are sort of shuffling those things down in. So with that in mind, can you, how could you give our audience some tactful advice about how to sort of simplify their health, right? So we all, like you said, use our minds to sort of like just process all this information. And then we get in this whirlwind of like, how much vitamin D do I need, and all these details. So how, is there a way that you can give people sort of a general tip, some tactical advice about how to sort of have a more simplified approach?
Yeah. So just to take your mind out of it. So we're always fabricating stories, whether research has shown this like over and over. We don't ever remember anything the way it was. It's just like our interpretation. And then that even changes as time goes on. We continue to change that story. So that memory it's never real. And so what you're saying is like, what I get is a lot of people as I do an intake are telling me possibly what they think is going on in their life,
For sure.
which is also inaccurate because people are usually not interpreting their life appropriately. So one of the simplest things is if you're not tracking something, then you can't necessarily see that it's changing and you can't have like an accurate picture of it. So first and foremost, whatever you're thinking is going on, just that's okay. Put that off to the side and start tracking whatever you want to see different. So for like one, people want to do weight and it's kind of like, so keep track of your weight and start keeping track of other markers. So not just your weight, if you can, if you have one of those impedance things, which shows you like body fat percentage, keep track of that. Or if you have like inches that you can measure and things like that, do that as well, because that's going to start giving you something you can actually track and do. But that's just like the numbers of your outcome. So like, then you want to take this game deeper and be like, okay, what do I really need to track that controls my weight? And for me, it starts going into sleep, the activity that you're doing, what you're eating, how much water are you drinking. And so if you can start tracking those things, then you can also start finding out, where am I lacking? Like, what am I doing well? So I can give myself some credit and some kudos. And then where are the places that I actually really need to make some changes? And then what you do is you put those two pictures together and you might realize, hey, what I'm doing is actually working really well. And I'm actually making gains and increases. And if I just stay the course long enough, I'll get to my goal. And so some people have to be okay, like instead of having that like 3 weeks or 1 month like outcome, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 12 months. And if you can just give yourself enough longevity of time, you're going to get there. But if you have the right system in place, the outcome's going to happen.
Yeah. We can just air a tiny bit of my dirty laundry here. How many times have I told you I was going to send you my food log? And then once I actually start writing down what I'm eating, it's like this light bulb moment. Like all of a sudden, because I thought, hey, I eat pretty healthy. I'm doing pretty good. And then I'm like, Saman, I need some help here. Can't, get to the next goal or whatever. Okay, just write it down and send it to me. And then I write it down. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm not getting enough protein or whatever the thing is. Like, you're
Right.
absolutely right. Just the act of the tracking and, having someone to talk to about it is huge. It's just so huge. It's been huge for me anyway.
Well, and the other thing that I'll give you kudos for is that you've done it so much now at this point that once you click in and track, like you don't have to send it to me because you've done it enough that you're like, you're not a novice, you're experienced and you kind of have seen the trends and you're kind of like, I need to make those changes. And that's the other thing about taking control of your health is sometimes we need help and coaching and different things, but hopefully that's building you up to put you in a place where you can then take care of it for yourself.
Yes, and I know that you don't want to take credit for this stuff because every time I try to give you credit for a goal that I achieve, you like brush it off like, Miranda, that's all you. But truly, I wouldn't be to that place where I can look through my food log and say, oh, here's kind of my main thing that I know I'm messing up. I wouldn't have gotten there without your help, which is why it's wonderful to work with you.
No, I appreciate it. And I'll constantly forever say that, but I can't do, and this is what I always get into with people is like, I can't eat the food for you. I can't do the workouts for you. I can't take care of your sleep. I can't do any of that stuff that's day in, day out. We have a conversation. Hopefully we transfer some kind of like information, and then you take it and you put it to work. And I think that's what's so important and that people have to take credit for, because you are doing all the work. And so everyone else has to do the work. And once they realize that I'm not necessarily, I don't know, like a guru or anything like that. Like that doesn't, we're just having a conversation, because then I learn from it too. And that's the thing I think it's so important, is that you're also teaching me. And when we're sharing stuff like that, I'm growing, you're growing. And then like, that's what helps us kind of like both move along.
Yeah. That's a perfect segue to the next thing I wanted to ask you about. As I said before, one of your superpowers is seeing someone's full potential and, not being afraid to address that with them, talk to them about it, push people in your, kind and loving way. So if our audience is at home and just struggling with that, which is happening a lot right now, like no judgment, it's a challenging thing that people are working through right now, and it kind of feels like maybe we're going to get to the end of some of this and going to be able to get back to something that feels a little bit more like normal life. So if our audience is struggling with feeling like they're not really stepping into their fullest potential, but they're not sure how to go about that, do you have any advice for them?
Yeah. So sometimes again, I think it goes back to the story, and probably this theme will kind of carry through over, but you have to get out of your head, because we're all creating stories that may or may not be true. Most of the time they're not true. And so sometimes getting outside constructive criticism, hopefully you go to a source that you trust, or somebody who like can see you and then be honest with you, and they can tell you what they really see. So sometimes asking friends and family for, if you have concerns, because you can start taking a consensus and you start finding out, okay, like I think I see this, or this is what I think. Is that what you see? Because a lot of times other people see us not the way that we see ourselves, and that can be super helpful. So that's where, like with a coach or like whatever the health thing is, you might think that you're not doing really well in certain areas, but you might be doing really great in those areas. And these other places that we have to work on that will really kind of just have like that big like tipping point for you, where it just makes all the change. So I think just we get lost up here, and that's why it's a processor. It's meant to like take information in and kind of help guide us or put things together, but it's not meant to drive. So it shouldn't be telling you the story or making the decisions of what you need to do next. That really has to happen more at like a lower level, and that's usually with the emotions, or you plugging in doing things and then being like, that doesn't feel right, or that's always making me angry, or I'm not seeing it move or flow. Why is that? So you take that step back to get perspective so you can refocus and then get yourself moving forward.
Okay, so do you have any practical, like, so if somebody feels uncertain about their purpose, do you have any practical ways that they can sort of tap into that? Like, I really like to journal. I feel like it creates clarity in my day, like what I'm trying to do and who I'm trying to be, and sort of gets rid of some of that clutter in my head. Do you have any practices that you could share with people?
Yeah. So for me, like I can give you mine, and these might not be for everybody. Like you're saying journaling, like I'm not a journaler. Like journaling doesn't necessarily work for me.
Sure.
Um, the journaling for me in the sense is a good way for me to jot down, like if I have stuff clogging up my head, to get it out of my head and get it down. But for me, is like meditation is the biggest thing, where I can kind of sit still, kind of get an idea of like where my thoughts are kind of running, and just kind of watch them and just get myself to kind of like disassociate from them, and then realize that that's not who I am. Those thoughts are not me. And we've
Yeah,
had this conversation where I tell you thoughts are like balloons, right? So there's a bunch of balloons in a room, and
I
some of them
love
have
this.
strings. And as they go by, what people will do is they'll grab that string, and then they'll get taken with that thought.
Mm.
And the biggest thing is, what ends up happening is sometimes we grab that string and we can't let go. So what I always say, and what we've talked about, is like pop that balloon. So that thought, you're giving the power. You still have the string in your hand, but at that point you're kind of like, okay, I'm not holding anything. You let it go.
Yeah.
And then at some point you want to start blowing up the balloons that you want to start filling the room. And so you start blow a balloon, put it in the room, blow it up. So you can start putting, and that's where like positive thoughts or thoughts that you want to create, the life that you want can become empowering. So that's what I do with my meditations to help me move forward. Another thing is when I'm doing something and it's not working, what I find is like, instead of like in my younger, life where I would just, you power through,
Just charge
like
ahead. Yeah. Like
just
make it happen.
crush every, and then so I'm kind of like,
Yeah.
okay, it's not flowing, it's not working. So step back, and then maybe go to another activity. Sometimes honestly, like my kids have been blessings in disguise, like just go play with them, because it gets me to kind of like just totally get out of my head, play with them, and then watch them too, as that reminder of they're just like having fun and living life and not taking it so seriously.
Yeah.
And so it helps me to click back into that. And so they've been amazing, like over these last like couple of years, just to remember that, because I will have that myself. Like I can attach to something and get so clicked in that I'm kind of like, okay, you got to let this go. And so they're just nice reminders for that. So sometimes just going and doing a different activity is a great way just to get your mind to kind of let go.
Yeah.
Those are kind of like the biggest ones that I really do. And for people, I would just tell them, you got to find, you're going to have to maybe play around, but like figure out what works for you.
Yeah. And that balloon idea is huge. I think it's so clearly like helps people understand how your thoughts aren't necessarily, not every single thought needs to be like held so sacred and near and dear to your heart. And that's how we think about it, right? Where it's like, oh, why am I, and I have, like, you've taught me so many amazing things over the years, but that is one of my favorites, and I pass it along to other people all the time. All the time. My girlfriends will be like, oh, I can't stop thinking about blah blah blah, or how am I going to do this or whatever. And I'll just say like, well, think about it like this. If your head is full of a bunch of balloons, and I go into your spiel.
I love it. I
Totally.
love it.
I always give you credit. I always give you credit, which I know you don't care, but I'm always like, well, my friend Saman taught me this thing, and just think, like, let it go. Just let that balloon go. Like that you don't have to think of every thought that comes into your head like it's this powerful truth, like sometimes you can just let it go, which I think is really huge. It's a great way to just think about that.
Yeah, the analogy, I think it was powerful when it came to me, and then I started sharing that with people and talking about people. And like you said, sometimes when people can have a concept they can kind of then grab of like what's happening with their thoughts, you can kind of simplify it. Then oh, okay, yeah, you're right, I can let that go. And
Yeah.
just making it simple just makes it like easier for people.
Yeah, totally clicked for me, obviously. So let's talk a little bit more about just the sort of health and wellness landscape in general. Do you see, I mean, I know you've been doing telemedicine for a long time, but other than that, or maybe that's something that you think people are going to be more pulled to do, but do you see any big shifts sort of happening in health and wellness? Just for curiosity, like, do you think the landscape is going to change at all because of everything that's happened recently?
I mean, it was actually, before this happened, it was already happening. What you were starting to see is a lot of health experts. Not only were they coming out with books and programs and different things that was just like being like giving stuff to people, where it was like, here's like 10 things that you can do at home. It doesn't cost you anything. Like, this is like my system, just follow it. I think
Yeah.
a lot of people are starting to step into really wanting to do it on their own. They want to figure out a way. They don't want to be dependent on, quote unquote, like a doctor or somebody. um, they want to be taught how to fish.
Yeah.
And if somebody can do that, like you the sky's the limit. Like you could do anything, because once you have control of it, and that means taking responsibility at the same time. So once you realize like, hey, maybe I'm in a place that I don't like, my health sucks, whatever it is, if you can just take responsibility, what ends up happening is that that you had choices and actions that got you there. But at the same time, it's not to put you down. It's to be like, oh, wow, if I got myself here, that means I can get myself somewhere else. And so that's
Right.
the empowerment of taking responsibility, where some people, it's like, it's not to shame you that like, if you got sick or whatever happened, it's to give you the power to realize, if I got here, that means I can go somewhere else. And once you can just take that in and hold that, then you become more powerful.
That's incredible. So if somebody, if people are listening to us and feel like they're in a place where they want to make a change, they want to get to better health, how could somebody decide what is best for them? Again, back to the thinking, right? Like,
Yeah.
how can you be sure? But do you have advice on how somebody could make sure that they're on the right path?
And so that's where, like, when we talked about those 5 assemblers, the generator, your body, indicator, emotions, like that's the game that you want to play. And so you just start doing things. And so a lot of times what I get people do, if you're not ready for like a big challenge to really get pushed and you need to build some confidence, start picking out usually like a handful of like little things that somebody can do. I just had somebody who wanted to start like reading more, but they had set the bar of like, I can't sit down and read like 5 pages a day. So we came up for him and I was like, read 1 page a day.
Right.
If you read more, great. But all you got to do is set yourself up to just read 1 page. That's it. Read the 1 page. If that's all you got in you that day, you read it, you get yourself like a little check or like a pat on the back, or you get to build some confidence. The book that he was trying to read, he ended up reading it in 3 weeks.
How funny is that?
Because we
It's
just,
incredible.
the threshold, like the activation energy that you need, if we can set that low enough, you start achieving like all these great things. But in your mind, you're just kind of like, oh, cool, I just have to read 1 page. Like that's doable. Most people can do that.
Yeah.
The other thing that he wanted to do is he wanted to start stretching and meditating. So again, we're like, stretch for 1 minute, meditate for 1 minute. Like the bar was so low that he was able to plug in and do that. He started taking the numbers up where he was telling me, I think within a few weeks, he was already stretching somewhere from like 8 to 10 minutes. Like he was just like, it started becoming a habit. Like I could do the 1 minute, wasn't a big deal. Once I was holding a stretch and I wanted to do the other stretch, he was just saying it turned into a couple of minutes. So I was like, let me do this stretch. Like you just get into things. Like once you start doing stuff, most people, this would be me or anybody else, once you just like get the thing out of the way and you start doing it, all of a sudden, like you're in the flow, you're kind of like, well, I could do this for like a little while longer. And you do.
Yeah.
So that's what I talk about, just setting that bar low to get yourself high.
Sure.
Just make things easy, because then you'll also start figuring out like what your purpose is. You'll start figuring out what you really enjoy. If it's 1 page a day and you do this for a month and you're like, I can't even get a page done, stop reading, go to audiobooks, change it, do something different. Like don't keep hitting your head on the wall.
Yeah.
Just do something different, but make things so easy that like you can just go do them.
Yeah. I like that. So many people will say like, oh, I can't get any reading. I want to read, but I just can't get it done. Like I just don't have the time. I don't, I can't get into a regular schedule. And it's because exactly like you said, they feel like in order for it to count as reading, it has to be like, I'm rapidly moving through all of these books all of a sudden. It's like, well, who said that is the marker of success when it comes to being a reader, right?
Right. And we've had
Yeah.
this talk, and so that's where the beliefs, like the director ends up coming in. So that person believes I don't have time for reading, or I'm not a good reader. And so they've already put this limitation, like they fence themselves in. And so in their mind, they're not a good reader. And so if they
Yeah.
even try to read and they already think that I'm a bad reader, they're setting themselves up to be not a good reader.
Yeah, totally. And if you change the mindset to be more like, I've started this super simple, easy thing where I'm going to read a page a day. That's all I'm doing. It's not a big deal. It's a page a day. That is so much more achievable. And then it's the progress, right? Where then you feel like, oh, I'm doing it. I can do more. I can do more. And then you just kind of keep on trucking. It's great.
Yeah. It's that snowball
Yeah.
effect.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, this is, I know, your wife's favorite question to ask her guests on the show, so I'm going to do it to you. What would you say your unique message is that you would want to share with the world right now?
My message always at this point is be you.
Mm.
I think it's the most important thing. I find people come alive when they're just being themselves. When you get out of your brain, you stop being what people expect or what even you expect of yourself. You just let all that stuff go and just be yourself. It's when you find people are the happiest. It's when they're doing the most, creating the most, being themselves. And like health is almost just like a side effect of that. And
Mm.
I can't find anything, as I continue to kind of like work with people or research stuff and that's becoming the most powerful thing. If you plug in like some of the tips, let's say that we gave today, if somebody tries to do those tips and it's not them, and they keep doing it, they're going to kind of like start creating this, like, and I always call it like resistance, but it's not going to be authentic. It's not going to be real. It's not for them. And that's why there's so many different ways to do things. Like, you just have to find what works for you. Don't do the things that don't work. And so this is where it's, when you're being you, you're being you, look in your life for what's working.
Mm-hmm.
If you look in those areas and you're like, that part of my life really works. Maybe it's your relationship with your spouse. Maybe you're really good at being organized. Maybe it's, you working out super easy for you. Then like, do more of what works for you, but also pay attention to how are you being when you're doing that?
Mm.
Because if you can take that and amplify that into the rest of your life, I just think it becomes super easy.
That's incredible. And, you have such an amazing way of sort of bringing that up with people without making them feel silly about, not being sure. I remember, a few times talking to you just about whatever it is that I was dealing with as far as my health and my life is concerned. And a few times you'll just real gently kind of call me on it, like, is that really a big deal to you though? Like, you get so focused on something that you're trying to make happen or feel like you should be doing. And, numerous times you'll be like, maybe just think about, do you really care that much? Right? Like, should you maybe just let it go, Miranda, and just be good at this other thing you're good at? And it's such an invaluable, I don't know, gift really to receive when working with you. If our audience wants to work with you, like I have, is there any way that they can do that, or how can they do that?
Yeah, so you can check out our website at www.blocksofhealth.com. You can get kind of a little more information on what we do. Always feel free to email us at info@blocksofhealth.com. We'll do like coaching packages. We can do like one-off visits. Sometimes we will do like a free 30-minute, what we call a design session. Because we really want to find out like what you're looking for, like what you're trying to create for your health. Sometimes that's an easy way to see if we're a good fit, because we also want to make sure that we're a good fit for you. So we can help you, but also like it works both ways. So we don't want it to be like a one-way direction, because it's a relationship and that's how things flow and that's how they work. So our Building Blocks podcast is something they can plug into. We have a Blocks of Health YouTube channel. There's a bunch of different ways to kind of look into us. Email us directly and find out, what we can do to kind of, if it's the right fit for you, like, let's make it work. Let's get you your health so that you can do all the other things and not worry about your health anymore.
Awesome. One last thing, and then I will let you go on about your day, Saman. Do you have a special gift or some sort of offering to share with our listeners today?
Yeah, the freebie that we have is just like a downloadable PDF. And so we call this our Blocks of Health 10-day project. And
Okay.
so the bar's set a little higher. So if you're looking for like the thing that we set up earlier with like the low bar, those are, I tend to design those with people like one-on-one, because I need to understand what you're doing. So what ours is, we're looking at 6 habits that you can do. And so it challenges you. And so the reason we really like project, and this is named project, is project-based learning is about, again, getting into doing something, the generator, and then listening to your indicator and figuring out what's the loop that you're stuck in. Am I coming up with excuses? So download this PDF. It's 10 days. We tell you to list either concerns or symptoms or whatever you have going on, and then rate it from 1 to 10. We put 3, so your top 3 that are kind of going on. And then plug in and do these things, like set that aside, do these 6 things for 10 days. We're telling you to sleep 7 to 9 hours a day. We're telling you to drink a gallon of water a day. We're telling you to work out 30 minutes a day.
Sure.
Right? We're telling you to get rid of all processed sugar. Right? So that doesn't mean fruit. That doesn't mean honey. That doesn't mean maple, but like anything that's processed, like that has to go.
So no gummy bears, like those are not.
As much as we love them, if you're doing those 10 days. So this is the cool thing. I'll get into the gummy bears though too, and you'll see how this might play in. The 5th thing is write a note to yourself and read it to yourself in the mirror every day with eye contact. It's so important, so deep, a positive note, because we just don't do enough of that for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And then the 6th one is just to reach out to friend, family member, send a message, call someone, text message, do something, just so you're thinking about somebody, you love someone, you appreciate them, something they did for you. Those 6 things, do those for like the 10 days, and then come back and reassess like whatever the concerns or symptoms were that you ranked, re-rank them and be like, 10's like it's really bad, like that drop to 7 while you were able to focus on these things in your life. And
Yeah.
just realize that like once your problems that you have, if you don't give them power and you start plugging into your health and doing the things that are good for you, those things kind of start to fade away. Now the other thing is, if you don't accomplish these things all through 10 days, it's not a big deal. That's why it's project-based learning. What you want to do is you want to start like understanding the self-talk and different dynamics and loops that you're stuck in, of being like, if I didn't do that today, why didn't I do that?
Sure. Yeah.
Why didn't I drink my gallon of water? Why didn't I sleep the 7 hours? And start looking for like the excuses and other things that you start coming up with. If you had gummy bears that day, that's okay. Just be like, okay, I was supposed to do processed sugar. I'm supposed to hold myself. Why couldn't I keep my integrity on that, in the sense, why did I have the gummy bears? Was I stressed out? Did I feel like I needed a treat? Was I just trying to be like a rebel, a rule breaker, and kind of be like, well, these are the things that I'm supposed to do for the 10 days, but I'm not going to do that. So you start to understand yourself a little bit better. And that's why I call it a block. It's a block of 10 days. See what happens, reassess. If you want to, do another block, do another 10 days of that project, and just figure out what you start doing is you start to cultivate, you start to understand who you are, but you also start to dial in like how you are when you do things, because this is the most important thing with your health that most people sometimes aren't even realizing why they're doing something. And so get yourself to focus on 6 habits, plug into it. The bar is set high on these. They're meant to be like that because we want you to fail. That's okay. We want you to fall down because you're going to learn the most from that. If you do the 10 days and it's super easy, you're not going to learn anything. We don't learn when we win. We learn when we fall down, and we have to get back up and be like, you have to reassess and be like, why didn't that work? Why didn't that happen? And so you actually engage your mind of being like, I want to get that done, or I'm going to get it done. And so you start figuring out ways to set yourself to win, to succeed, to then create what you want. And that's what we really find is the most powerful.
That is such a smart way to think about it. That's such a smart way to think about it. Even just you talking about that, in my head, I thought, if I did go for the gummy bears, it would probably be because I was tired. And then I was like, oh, how many other bad decisions do I make when I'm tired? Like even just now talking to you, I like had this moment of realization, not even going through the thing, but just thinking about that. So it's such a smart way to set people up to shift to just making holistically better, smarter life choices sort of all together. That's great. So smart.
Yeah, hopefully if people are able to download it, give it a shot, try it out. Don't be harsh on yourself. Just learn and just live and just do the health that you want to do.
That's awesome. Saman, thank you so much for being my guest today on the Recreate Your Health project. I had so much fun talking to you, like I always do. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great day.